Hey everybody, I'm CrazyCat42 and welcome to my top 8 dungeons in Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass list. For those of you who don't know, Phantom Hourglass is the sequel to the great game that is The Wind Waker. Now this is one of the more underrated Zelda games, and I kinda see why some people might not like it, but it's still a great game, so I wish more people would give it a try. We're not here to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about the dungeons in the game. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show. At number 8 is the Temple of the Ocean King. This dungeon is the main reason a lot of people don't like Phantom Hourglass, because it'll suck the life out of you while you're in it, which is not very fun. Oh yeah, one more thing. You're also on a time limit on this dungeon, so yeah, you're kind of rushed. Oh, it's also full of enemies that are invincible and can kill you one hit. Yay! And to top it all off, you have to do this dungeon multiple times, doing the same puzzles over and over again. Like, you can take shortcuts to some of your later items, but still doesn't change the fact that this dungeon is boring and annoying, which is why it's at the bottom. At number 7 is the first proper dungeon of the game, the Temple of Fire. Now this is the dungeon where you get the boomerang, and it's used for a few simple puzzles like hitting switches in a certain order, so yeah, nothing too complicated. Then we have the boss. He's split into 3 pieces and you have to combine him using the boomerang, but you can't combine them in just any order. You have to look at the top screen and combine them in the order of how many horns they have. So the first horn, then the order of second, and then the third horn. So it's a pretty cool and unique boss. Once it's combined, you just stab it a bunch of times and you get yourself a heart container and a fairy. So overall, it's a pretty decent first dungeon. Up next is the Temple of Courage. Okay, first of all, I'll have to point out that this dungeon brings back the Pole's voice, an enemy we haven't seen since the Oracle's games, which is pretty cool. Now this is the dungeon we get the bow, which is used for a few puzzles involving these things to shoot arrows into, and they shoot them back out in the right direction to point at, so that's pretty cool. Then we have the boss, who is a crab who can turn invisible. But don't worry, if you look at the top screen, you can see what he sees, so you can fight him and stab him to death. Overall, this is a pretty good dungeon. At number 5 is the Temple of Wind. Now, as the name implies, this dungeon is full of wind. Now this is the dungeon we get bombs, which is pretty cool. Now this dungeon is full of a bunch of simple wind-based puzzles, so you shouldn't have anything to worry about. The boss of this dungeon is the Stirrer of Winds, Cyclock. To beat him, you throw bombs into his tornado and then stab him a bunch of times. So overall, this dungeon is pretty simple. I guess you could say it's a breeze. At number 4 is the dreaded Ghost Ship. When you enter the ship, you'll meet the youngest of the Cubist sisters, just as our older sisters are all held up somewhere in the ship, and she asks you to go find them for her. So, as you make your way through the rickety hull of the ghost ship, you'll eventually find the other Cubist sisters, and then you have to guide them all past the evil Sculptures and the deadly Reaplings. Eventually, you notice something odd about the Cubist sisters. For example, you'll eventually come across a pair of chests and they'll tell you to open the left one, but in fact that one's a trap. You'll eventually reunite all the Cubist sisters, who will then reveal themselves to be the diabolical Cubist sisters, who are ghosts. Woo! You'll then battle them on the deck of the ship in an evil game of volleyball, and once you beat them, you'll get your hands on the Ghost Key. Woo! You'll then reunite with Tetra, who has been turned into a statue. I like this dungeon because I feel like it's a great way to mark the halfway point of this game. Also, fun fact, this dungeon, you cannot revisit it, so that's kind of unique. At number 3 is the Temple of Ice. Now anyone who's seen any of my previous rankings knows that I like ice levels, so it makes sense that this one will be pretty high on the list. In this dungeon you get the grappling hook, which is used in lots of unique ways in this game. It works kind of like the hook shot in other games, but not only that, you can also use it to make a tightrope, which Link can use to walk across, which is pretty awesome. You can also use it to pull fire switches, which is pretty neat. You can even use it to make a catapult Link across gaps. That's pretty unique and awesome. Then we have the boss Gliak, who's a pretty awesome boss. What you have to do is use your grappling hook to make a slingshot to catapult his projectiles back at him to break off his armor. Then you stab him a bunch of times and he's dead. So overall this dungeon is pretty cool. Get it? Because it's an ice dungeon. Number 2 is Mutto's Temple. In this dungeon, you get the hammer, and its item's unique as in Link does not use it. Your fairy companion Seela is the one who uses it, so that's pretty interesting how Link doesn't use the item. I think this might be the only item in the series that does that, so that's pretty cool. In this dungeon, you have to rise and lower the water level to get around the dungeon. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as the water temple, it's actually pretty simple. Then we have the boss, Eox, who's a giant golem. To beat him, first you get your hammer and smash all the weak points on his body to destroy all his stone armor. Then you smash a bunch of other weak points to break him down to size. Then you just gotta climb on top of his head and stab him a bunch of times and he's dead. Overall this dungeon is pretty awesome, but there is one dungeon I like a little more than it. And my favourite dungeon in Phantom Hourglass is the Goron Temple. I'd like to point out that this temple is a Goron themed dungeon that doesn't have fire in it. I know, that's pretty interesting. Like the only other Goron dungeon I can think of that's like that is Snowhead from Majora's Mask. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, in this dungeon you get bomb shoes, which is pretty cool. But the thing I really like about this dungeon is the fact that you get to use a Goron in it alongside Link. That's pretty awesome. Anyway, you switch between Link and Goron to solve a bunch of puzzles. This makes this dungeon pretty unique compared to the other Phantom Hourglass dungeons. Then we have the boss, Dongo Rongo. To beat him, you use Goron to knock him over, then use Link to put a bomb to his mouth and he blows up. So it's a pretty cool boss, and that's why this is my favourite dungeon in Phantom Hourglass. Anyway, thank you all for watching, I've been CrazyCatcher42, and I'll see you all next time. Hey guys, if you like my video, give it a big old thumbs up, and if you want to see some more Zelda related videos, click on the thumbnails on the screen.